Hello everyone, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Duval Mafia here, and in today's video I'm going to be going over the 2022 NFL free agents for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm also at the end of the video going to touch on a couple players who could be on the trading block this offseason. Not too sure about it, but it is a possibility, and I'm going to go quickly over that as well. But to get right into this, right at the top of the list is Cam Robinson. He is the left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is 26 years old, and honestly, I like Cam. I think he's a very solid. He bounced back. He had that torn ACL that most Jaguars fans are probably familiar with, and it did slow him down quite a bit. But still, at 26 years old, he is a more than serviceable left tackle. And this is a guy who I think he's very dependent, in my opinion, on whether the Jacksonville Jaguars draft Evan Neal or they do not. If they don't draft Evan Neal, I think Cam Robinson is one of the top priority free agents for the Jaguars. I mean, for obvious reasons, you have to protect Trevor Lawrence, and Cam Robinson is about in the middle of the pack, in my honest opinion, for going around the league and looking at left tackles. He's not quite at the top of the list, like he's nothing special, but he's also not one of the worst in the league. I would not put him on that list. I think he's more than serviceable, especially in the run game. I like him in the run game a lot. I think he's very strong in the run game. And at 26 years old, he's still extremely young for an offensive lineman. He probably has a good another 5 to 7 years in him. Whether he gets a 5 to 7 year extension is another question, but he's still young at 26, and I think Jaguars have to keep him if they do not draft Evan Neal. If they draft one of Aiden Hutchinson or Kayvon Thibodeaux, Cam Robinson has to be a top 3 priority for them this offseason. And there's really no other way around it because you can't have some random left tackle in there. The only other option I can maybe think of off the top of my head is Walker Little. But I don't know if you want to put all your eggs in Walker Little's basket after, even though he looked good, we have not seen a lot of him. We haven't seen enough of him to not re-sign Cam Robinson and also not draft a clear left tackle. Like, I like Walker Little. I'm actually a very big fan of Walker Little. But again, I'm not going to say that I want to sit here and not draft Evan Neal, not re-sign Cam Robinson, and just have Walker Little on an island at left tackle. Whether he struggles or does good, we just leave him there no matter what. I don't like that, especially for Trevor Lawrence's sake. I don't think his blind spot should be treated like that. I think it has to be a very large priority for the Jaguars. And to move on to the next guy, it's going to be Andrew Norwell. At 30 years old, Norwell came to the Jacksonville Jaguars after an all-pro season, I believe 4 seasons ago, with the Carolina Panthers, and everybody thought Andrew Norwell was going to be one of the best guards in the league for these 4 years with the Jaguars. And even though he was pretty good overall, he was honestly very underwhelming, and honestly, I was not very impressed with him. I think the Jaguars kind of overpaid him, sadly, looking back. I mean, looking back at the contract wasn't too bad, but for the production the Jacksonville Jaguars got out of Andrew Norwell, I'm not very impressed with him. And I think his contract was about middle of the pack. It wasn't a bad contract for the production that he gave, but he also could have been a lot better. I guess he had some would call an anomaly season when he had that All-Pro. I thought he was an All-Pro level guard. I thought the Jaguars made an amazing signing with getting him. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. I mean, it was a good signing, but like I said, for the contract, it wasn't that great. I mean, he did get paid like a Pro Bowl level guard, and he did not play to that. He played to a solid guard, but not Pro Bowl level or All-Pro level. And to move on to the next guy, it's actually the other guard on the right side, A.J. Kahn, who he's also 30 years old. And A.J. Kahn's a guy who is kind of just under the radar for the Jaguars, I feel like. He's not anything special, and he's nothing, like, he's not going to go get a Pro Bowl. He's not going to go to an All-Pro. He's not one of those top guys, but he's just serviceable and he does his job. And I think the Jaguars should re-sign him for similar to the deal that he got. I believe he had roughly $5 million a year for the past couple of years with the Jaguars. I think that's a good number for him because he's a serviceable guard when you play him. And you're not expecting to get anything special out of him, but you're also expecting him to do his job. And I mean, if the Jaguars do want to move on from Khan, I'm not opposed to drafting a guard or drafting some sort of interior alignment to replace him. But I don't know if I like the idea of letting Norwell and Khan both walk in the same offseason. Because having both your interior guards walk in the same offseason is kind of scary to me, in all honesty. Because even though you do want to rework the offensive line, you don't want to have like 3 or 4 new starters out there at the beginning of the season. Because realistically, you want this unit to gel, you want them to have chemistry, you want them to work together. And if you're constantly having a revolving door at each position, you're not going to get good production and you're not going to get good chemistry with them as a group. So ideally, I do want to see the Jaguars hopefully touch on that. But whether they draft somebody or re-sign AJ Khan, I hope they have a good plan for this position. And I really wouldn't like to see both starting guards walk in the same free agency. But if the Jaguars feel like they can draft as well as sign improvements or people who will fit better, then I'm all for it and I'm all for trying it out. I'm not opposed to reworking the offensive line, as it obviously does need work, but I also don't want to start out with 80% of a new O-line and just hope that it works, if that makes sense. Because obviously priority number one has got to be protecting Trevor Lawrence. And to move on to the next guy, it's going to be Taven Bryan, honestly, even though he has started to produce a little bit this year, I think it's a little bit too late for me in my eyes. I'm not opposed to keeping Taven Bryan, but I don't want to pay him anything crazy. I mean, he only made $2.5 million this offseason. So, I mean, if he makes something around that number, maybe a little bit more, maybe something in the ballpark of like 2 years, $6 million, I would give him something like that gladly. I think that's enough for a rotational defensive lineman, which is what he realistically is. When we drafted Taven Bryan, we did have expectations for him to be, honestly, a very solid interior defensive lineman. And I mean, he's okay, but he's honestly nothing special. And I wouldn't be mad if he walked. I do like Taven Bryan as a locker room guy. I think he's honestly a good guy. I would, like I said, if we got him to a 2-year, $6 million deal or something in that ballpark, I would honestly be very happy, because he's the type of guy I actually want to keep on this team. I think he's actually starting to reach his ceiling, and he's starting to improve. I mean, we saw it this season. He definitely took a step forward this season, and I'm excited to see him grow as a player. Hopefully he does stay a Jacksonville Jaguar, but I also don't want to overpay him in the process. So if he does try to seek out a larger contract than a rotational defensive lineman type contract, then all is gone, and honestly, good riddance. I'm not going to be too mad if he walks. And on to the next guy, it's going to be Jihad Ward. Jihad Ward is actually one of my favorite guys, honestly. I mean, from a personality standpoint, he's a very blunt guy, and he's a very funny guy, in my opinion. I actually like him in this locker room. I think he's tight. He's still only 27, turning 28 years old soon. So he's not exactly like a veteran, but he does have that veteran presence when he comes into the locker room. And he's a guy that I would absolutely love to keep if we do keep him. Now, I know he didn't get paid too much this offseason, and he was probably thinking he was coming to more of a special team, considering the contract he took. But if he would take another year or two of similar value to the contract that he had this year, which was $2.5 million, I would be all for keeping him. Even though he's, again, a more rotational level guy, he's another guy that I would love to keep on this team long term. And you want more of a culture and a locker room type of building. That's the main important things for guys like Taven Bryan and Jihad Ward for me. These guys are what help you build the locker room and build the culture, and that's really the most important part for me. You don't want to keep drafting and signing new guys every year, every 2 years, because you're just not going to build a culture. You're not going to build a family type environment with these players if you're consistently doing that. And to move on to the next guy, it's Trey Herndon. Now, I know Trey Herndon did take a step back this year in production, and he honestly didn't play very well. But this takes nothing away from Trey Herndon in my eyes. I still think he belongs on this team as a backup cornerback at worst. Or if we give him more time in the slot, whatever it may be, on special teams, I do think there's still a role in this team for Trey Herndon. He still is only 26 years old, and he only made $2 million this season, so he didn't make much. And I think Trey Herndon is the exact type of guy the Jaguars have to keep. I mean, even though he is nothing, like, he's not going to go to the Pro Bowl, he's not going to go to be an All-Pro. That's not the level of player he is. But I do love Trey Herndon, what he brings to the team, and I think he's a very good depth cornerback at worst, because he's been in the system for a while. He's been on this team for a few years now. We got him as an undrafted free agent, so he started from the bottom, so I don't think he's going to come in and be greedy. I think if you offered him something like a 3-year, $12 million contract, something in that ballpark, I think he would definitely take it. And I think even though those contracts sound like they're going to add up, those are the type of contracts the Jaguars have to secure, and they have to secure people that are going to help, as I've said, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but help create a culture and create a winning family type culture here. Because you want to build a positive culture. Because Tom Coughlin, with his time here, he tore the entire culture that we were building in 2017 to the ground. And the only way to start it is you have your cornerstone Trevor Lawrence, who's a great off-the-field guy. He's your cornerstone of your culture that you're trying to build. And you need to keep these guys, and you need to keep them in the building so that you can continue to build up that culture. And then you get to the point where you can start bringing in free agents solely off of the culture and solely off of they want to come here and be a part of this. So Trey Herndon is another guy I want to keep. And Damian Wilson is another guy, I don't know if I really like him. I'd probably rather either draft or sign a linebacker in free agency. Damian Wilson played okay, but looking back, I don't really understand what they did, because they kept Damian Wilson, or they signed Damian Wilson, I should say. And Damian Wilson is 28 years old, sorry. But so he's not quite old, but I still don't understand why we moved on from Joe Sherbert so quickly and then signed Damian Wilson. I don't really understand that. I mean, I guess from a contract standpoint, Joe Sherbert was making a good bit more money, and they were trying to realistically just clear that contract. But I mean, Joe Sherbert was by no means overpaid. I mean, he was a top 15 linebacker in the league, in my honest opinion. Like, he was not quite Pro Bowl level, but he was close enough to it to play towards his contract. And even though Damian Wilson's contract was pretty small this year, I still don't think he produced enough to gain some large contract extension similar to Joe Sherbert's or Miles Jack's. And I feel like that's what he's probably going to be looking for. If he's not looking for that, and he's looking for something in that middle range or even on the lower end to stay the starting linebacker for us, then I'm all for it. But like I said, I'm not really looking to spend big money there. I'd rather just sign somebody in free agency or even draft his replacement. He's nothing special to me, and I personally didn't really see anything that I loved too much. I mean, he had his flashes, of course. Like, in the last game, he did have a couple very good plays. But again, I didn't see enough of him for me to jump out of my shoes and be like, oh, we got to keep this guy and be adamant about it. I didn't see enough from him for that. And to move on to the next guy, it's Tyler Shatley. Shatley's now 30 years old, and he's been a backup lineman for the Jaguars for a few years now. And there's not really much to say about him. I mean, he's a backup lineman. If he stays for a small contract, so be it. If he doesn't, he walks. I'm not really too worried about it. Nevin Lawson, another one. He's 30 years old, turning 31 soon. Just a random backup, kind of like roster filler. He's nothing really special to me. I don't really have any attachment to him. I wouldn't be mad if he walked. And then another one is Adam Gotsis. This is actually one that I would like to keep if the price is right. Now, I say that because a lot of guys, when they have decent years like Gotsis had, he didn't have a special year, but he had a good year considering the role that he began the year with. But to move on to the next guy, it is going to be DJ Chark, who's a very obvious free agent that pretty much any Jags fan would know about. And DJ Chark, for me, at 25 years old, he's probably the wide receiver one for this team, even though he got hurt. That's probably the role that he would have had this year pretty clearly. I mean, maybe Marvin Jones can be argued, but I think DJ Chark was the wide receiver one. He was getting CB1s in matchups, and I mean, that's the truth of it. But at 25 years old, I would love to sign DJ Chark to a 4-year to 5-year deal in that maybe 10 to 12 million range. I think that's a very good range for him. Now, is he going to accept a deal like that, or is somebody going to offer him something better? It is possible, but I think that's very fair for DJ Chark. I think, considering he loves Jacksonville, or he seemed like he loves Jacksonville, I think that's a very fair offer for both sides. The Jaguars get a very high-end wide receiver too, in my honest opinion, at a very decent contract, and they can either A, go out and sign somebody like Chris Godwin, try to go after Devontae Adams. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but try to go after maybe Michael Gallup and get like a wide receiver 1A, 1B type scenario going. Go after these guys, and then you secure Chark on a relatively middle-of-the-pack type deal. I think that's the best case for the Jaguars, and if they can secure Chark on a contract like that, I would be extremely happy. And I do think that DJ Chark might get slightly more than that because he does have a lot of potential. I mean, there's not many wide receivers that are 6'3", 6'4", who run a 4.3 with good hands that come into the league very often. I think Jaguars fans and the NFL in general is really underestimating the true value and the true talent that DJ Chark has. I mean, we were only seeing him beginning to get that chemistry in Trevor Lawrence, and we saw some amazing touchdowns from them. I mean, I was shocked by a couple of those touchdown throws and catches. Like, they were like, you could just see that they were starting to get the feeling for each other, and it really shows you that DJ Chark needs to be re-signed. He's probably my top free agent on this list, if not top 2. I mean, he's one of the most important guys for me, and it's really not even close. So hopefully the Jaguars can lock him down and hold him to at least another 4 or 5 years. I would love to keep DJ Chark. I love DJ Chark. He's one of my favorite Jaguars. On and off the field, he's a very stand-up guy. He's just one of the best guys on this team, and I would really hope that we do keep him, but only time will tell. And to move on to the next guy, it's going to be Tavon Austin, who, even though Tavon Austin played a small role, I did like the aspect that he brought. But I will say that the role that he was playing is more or less the role that Travis Etienne is likely to be given, in my viewpoint. So I wouldn't be opposed to keeping Tavon Austin if it's a very small contract. And it's just kind of a contract that he wants to be part of this team. He wants to be part of the room, and he wants to hang out with this team and be a backup and just be a veteran presence. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But like I said, I'm not giving him anything than a very small contract. I mean, he's not going to have much of a role on this team next year, even if he is re-signed. And to move on to the next guy, Laurenti McCray. He's 31 years old, and he's been on the Jags for a few years now. I mean, it's been a good bit now at this point. He's another one of those guys, I'm going to say it again. He's a locker room type guy. He's the type of guys that you want to build this locker room up with. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to say that they would rather just draft people and sign people in free agency because, you know what, this team isn't winning, blah, 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 this and that. I understand that. I really do understand that point of view, and I understand where people are coming from. But my counterpoint to that is you want to build the foundation with the guys that we have right now. Even though this team is not winning football games, we still have decent players on this team. It is still an NFL team. Like, whether people want to admit it or not, we are maybe 3 or 4 good players away from being a playoff team. I mean, let's be honest about it. Like, this team is nowhere near as bad as they're playing. I think the bad coaching this year hurt them a lot, and also they're one of the youngest teams in the league. I believe for the Jaguars, with who they have on contract, they're one of the top 5 youngest teams going into 2022, and they're only going to get younger once this draft concludes. With 11 picks in this draft, they're only going to get younger. So people need to understand that this is a long-term thing, and Laurenti McCray, if he would stay on a smaller type deal, similar to Jihad Ward, similar to Taven Bryan, if he wants to be in the same boat as those guys, I would be open to keeping him. But if he does leave in free agency, I would understand and I wouldn't be too upset. Jacob Hollister is the next guy, and I know this offseason, I included, I kind of overhyped him a little bit. I thought he was going to come in and be a very solid piece for us, but obviously Jaguars fans realize how that went. I mean, the guy went way far down on the depth chart, especially when Dan Arnold showed up. Even before Dan Arnold was here, I mean, he was nowhere to be found. But once Dan Arnold showed up, Jacob Hollister kind of became null and void, and I'm not really interested in re-signing him. If he does get re-signed as a tight end 3, tight end 4, I won't be mad. But I don't see anything special in him. And to move on to the next guy is Tyrell Adams. This is another guy, honestly, I won't be upset if he gets, if they let him walk. But if he gets re-signed, I won't be mad. If he walks, I won't be mad either. He's kind of one of those middle guys, I mean, it's cool if we keep him, but if we don't keep him, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to impact this team too much. And the next guy is actually Will Richardson, who I'm actually a very big fan of Will Richardson. Still at 26 years old, I think he could be a very key backup / swing piece on this offensive line, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is he can play multiple positions on the offensive line. So he's a very vital piece to have as a backup. So say our left tackle gets hurt, so you have to swing somebody over to left tackle, or you even plug him in at left tackle, vice versa. But then you say the right guard gets hurt, you can plug him in at right guard as well. I mean, it's a very versatile piece, and he becomes very valuable, and he outplays his contract sheerly off of his versatility. So if we are able to retain Will Richardson, I will be happy. But again, if he does walk, he's not going to be end of the world. You can always draft another versatile offensive lineman in the draft, whether it's a tackle, guard. I'm not really too worried about that. It's a nice thing to have somebody with NFL experience as a versatile rotational piece. But if we don't, so be it. It's not going to be the end of the world. That actually concludes the unrestricted free agents. So to move on to the next part of this, it's going to be the exclusive rights free agents and the restricted free agents. So for the exclusive rights, it's Chappelle Russell, the linebacker, and then Terry Godwin, the wide receiver. I would like to keep both of these guys, whether it is on the practice squad or what maybe in the back end of the roster. I would like to keep these two guys, but if they are let walk by the Jacksonville Jaguars, again, not the end of the world. These are lower on the totem pole type guys. They're not really going to come in and change much, but they do help give depth. And I mean, Terry Godwin, when given a little bit playing time, as well as Chappelle Russell, actually, they both played decently well when they were given time and they were given snaps. But again, I don't see too much happening with that. And the next three guys are going to be interesting because it's going to be people that the Jacksonville Jaguars fans actually are quite familiar with. The first one is going to be Andrew Wingard, who I would like to keep Wingard. He is a restricted free agent, meaning that the Jaguars can tender him. So he's pretty much going to be a Jaguar if they want him to be, is what that means essentially. So if they non-tender him, he becomes an unrestricted free agent. He can go wherever he wants. But if they do keep him tendered, he's pretty much going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar next season at least. And the same goes for Dare Ogunbowale, who I don't know if I would keep him. I mean, I feel like if James Robinson and Travis Etienne are both back and what many would say healthy, I don't really see the value in Dare Ogunbowale. I mean, it's not bad to have the depth and somebody who has played NFL snaps in that role. But I will say that if we do keep him, I won't be mad. But if we do let him walk and try to find a larger role somewhere else, I will understand. And for the last guy, it's going to be Dakota Allen, the linebacker. And Dakota Allen, when given snaps, actually looked pretty decent. So I would like if the Jaguars did tender him. But only time will tell if they will tender him. I'm not too sure if they will. If they don't, then he'll probably get picked up by somebody because I can see him playing a role as a rotational linebacker. And especially on special teams too. He's a valuable piece on special teams. I saw him a few times make plays. But I would actually like the Jaguars to keep the tender on him and make sure that Andrew Wingard and Dakota Allen are both Jaguars next season. Dare Ogunbowale, I don't know. I'm kind of iffy with him. If they believe James Robinson and they believe Travis Etienne will both be healthy next season, I don't really see the true value in re-signing Ogunbowale unless it's for a very small contract. Because at that rate, you can just draft a run back in the later rounds, and I mean, let's be honest, they'll play the same role as Ogunbowale. But with that being said, I'm going to move on to the final topic, which was going to be the trade scenarios. So the two players that I was going to talk about is Myles Jack and Clavon Chason. So to start with Myles Jack, he has been rumored to be on the trading block. I don't know if it's true, but I will say if he is traded, the Jacksonville Jaguars will probably at worst get a second-round pick back, maybe even a late first, depending on what team it is. Because Myles Jack is still a Pro Bowl level talent. Even though he didn't make the Pro Bowl this year, he is still that level of talent. And he's still probably going to be a top 15, top 10 linebacker wherever he goes if he is traded. I'm not saying I want Myles Jack traded. I do not want him traded. And I think he's still a key part of this defense. But if that is the direction that the Jacksonville Jaguars want to go this offseason, they will probably get a second-round pick and a player, or maybe even a late first-round pick back. If it takes giving up a 5th or 6th round pick along with Myles Jack to get a late first or get a early to mid-second, I would be willing to do it, in all honesty. I think getting those draft picks and getting solid young players is a very important piece. But ideally, they don't trade him. And for Clavon Chason, I don't really know what to say about this because I love Cleveland Chason. I think it's way too early to give up on him. But I know a lot of Jaguars fans at this point are kind of done with the dude. And I've seen a lot of people that are pretty much ready to give up on him. I'm personally not. I would hope that they do keep him at least another year, maybe even 2 more years. Because I really do want to see him reach his prime when he turns 24, 25, when he truly starts blossoming into the player that he can be. That's the time when you decide if you're going to keep him or you're going to move on from him. Like, I do understand the frustration with Jaguars fans, but I will say he was drafted very young, and he's still very young. I mean, he's still only 22, turning 23 years old. He's nowhere near his ceiling at this point. He's still growing as a player. And I just ask Jaguars fans to probably give him 1 more year if he isn't traded. If he is traded, you could expect to maybe get a 3rd round pick. Maybe if you're lucky that a team's in love with him, get like a 2nd. But again, in that scenario, the Jaguars would have to probably give like a 4th, 5th, or 6th round pick back to try to get something in the 2nd or 3rd round for him. And at that point, I don't really see the value. So at that point, I'd rather just keep him for another year and see what he can develop into. But only time will tell with that. And those are the 2 guys that I've really seen most of the trade stuff about so far. But ideally, I don't want to see either of them traded. But if they are traded, I do understand it. And I won't be too mad if they are traded, because both of them would probably go to situations where they'd be happier. And they'd probably go to situations where they would either have better fits or they'd get more snaps or whatever it may be. But ideally, we keep both of them. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video, so thank you for listening. And if you made it all the way here, I appreciate you very much. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like. If you are new, make sure to subscribe. And as always, peace out, Duval.